Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 Waste Management Phoenix Open Initial Research Show. Hope you had a fantastic Pebble Beach, unlike me. Hope you played all the Rory, played a lot of Scotty Scheffler, played Sepp, played all of the good plays, Russell Henley, unlike me. And you stayed away from the J-Day, although he did finish fairly well. You stayed away from, I mentioned Brendan Todd, who finished DFL. It's just not a good tournament for yours truly. So I hope you had a lot of success this past week at Pebble. I have followed a very clear pattern so far in 2025. The Century was bad. Sony was good. The Amex was a disaster. The Farmers was really good. Pebble was really bad. So, pattern suggests that I might be okay this week. We'll see. But we're going to try and right the ship after a very poor week this week at Pebble. And we turn our attention to Scottsdale, the greenest show on grass. It's always a fun tournament, a little wild, but a lot of fun and a very strong field this week. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where I will post some research tomorrow regarding previous champions of the Waste Management Phoenix Open, some patterns that they all share, players in the field this week who share those patterns, all of that, some course info as well. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contest I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see the players I'm using most often in my lineups, where I'm putting my money, where my mouth is that week, then give me a follow over at X. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle's in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. Really is a wonderful way to start your week of preparation. And if you are a subscriber to his article, which is free to do, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday as we continue the DFS talk over there. You really are missing out. It's always fun, informative, interactive. Can't say enough great things about it. So go show him some support, follow him over on social media, and subscribe to his article. Again, it's free to do. Lastly, we're live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. In addition to how your Pebble Beach went, what do you know of TBC Scottsdale? Who do you think the early favorite is this week? Want to hear from you all, so jump into chat. Make your voices heard. And if you're not able to catch the show live, as always, put your opinions in the comments. I'll get to those as well. So let's get into it. Let's do our initial research for the 2025 Waste Management Phoenix Open. And we start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. We are in Scottsdale, Arizona at TPC Scottsdale. This is a very fun course, most famously known for the Stadium Par 3 that gets quite wild. This is originally a Tom Weiskopf and Jay Morris design. It was renovated by Tom Weiskopf in 2014. A couple of quick notes here. Phoenix had a very, very long, dry streak in terms of no rain. So probably going to be pretty firm and pretty fast, which is usually the case here anyway. The conditions you will often hear are dome-like, much like the American Express in Coachella Valley, but very, very dry. High temperatures during the overseed process made establishment of those grasses more challenging. The ridge work was done to enhance the fan experience on 6 and 12, meaning over or bypasses, I guess, walkways for fans during the tournament, but nothing really to the course has been done. And TPC Scottsdale is a fairly short, in terms of total yardage, it's mid-length, but it's a fairly short, maybe slightly less than average par 71 measuring 7,261 yards. So no short course, no long course, which is quite a bit different than what we've had to start the year. I believe every single course has either been extremely long, Kapalua, TPC, the Torrey Pines, or extremely short, like Waialae, American Express, the stadium course, and all of those rotations. Pebble Beach and Spyglass is very short. So the first week this year that we're just looking at an average length course or a mid-length course, and we are done with the Pro-Ams. No significant Pro-Am like the American Express, like Pebble Beach. We are just looking at a 4-day tournament on the same course, traditional waves of Thursday and Friday, swapping AM and PM. Some other things with TBC Scottsdale. I normally put this in the Poa Trivialis putting, but I think that might have been mistaken whenever I've been doing that. Yes, these greens are Poa Trivialis, but that's their base. And all of the other courses that I use the Poa Trivialis is Poa Trivialis overseed, because the Bermuda is dormant on those courses. So if I grab my notes here off to the side, for example, TPC Scottsdale is usually bunched with Harbor Town, with Innisbrook, the stadium course at the American Express, Quail Hollow, Memorial Park, Sawgrass, San Antonio. Those places are Bermuda base, but due to the portion of the year that the PGA Tour visits those places, the Bermuda is dormant, and so they use Poa Trivialis overseed. This is Poa Trivialis base with ryegrass overseed. So again, credit here to Gabe in his article. I believe the only other course on the PGA Tour that has this is La Quinta, part of the American Express. But we don't get ShotLink at La Quinta. So will be interesting to see how we approach this week. Would love to hear your all's thoughts in that regard. I'm definitely going to need to reach out to Gabe and see what he thinks in terms of how to attack putting, if this is indeed this Poa Trivialis base versus Bermuda-based Poa Trivialis overseed that I've got TPC Scottsdale bunched in with. The rest of the course is perennial rye and fescue overseed, fairways, rough, and all that. The greens are fairly large. Some of these can be slightly smaller than the PGA Tour average, and some of these are gargantuan greens. But on average, these are a little over 7,000 square feet. So those are pretty large by PGA Tour standards. PGA Tour average is right around 6,000. Honestly, it's slightly less than that. I just like to round to nice whole numbers. A little bit of fairway. That's also misspeaking. About average width in terms of fairways. You get up to about 30 yards in the landing areas. That's considered fairly generous. For example, like Torrey only has 23 or 24 acres of fairway. There's not a whole lot of rough around Scottsdale, and they keep it fairly short, generally 2 inches long or so. In fact, if we skip ahead just a little bit, you see rough length was short last year when the first round measured. 2023 was short, average. It's not long by any means. It's generally pretty short. So not a whole lot of rough around TBC Scottsdale. There are only 3 water hazards, but they do come into play on 6 holes. Most notably, probably the 15th, par 5 15th, which is a risk-reward par 5, island green, and 17, drivable par 4, but water on the left and right next to the green. 18, players have to drive over water to reach that fairway. So only 3 water hazards, but they do come into play on a third of the holes. So there's a look at TBC Scottsdale in terms of a GCSA tournament fact sheet. Again, no architect filter to use in Fantasy National. This is a Tom Weiskopf design. Weiskopf does have his hands on a few courses on the PGA Tour, but not enough to have his own filter in Fantasy National. Sorry, just adjusting a couple settings there. Mid-length par 71, 4 par 3s, 3 par 5s. The greens are Poa Trivialis base and rye overseed, so going to be interesting to see how we attack that this week. I'll definitely have a better idea of that once I get in touch with Gabe tomorrow, or at least that's the hope, is to get in touch with Gabe tomorrow. Large greens, I'll say fairly forgiving fairways. There are some strategic bunkers placed throughout some of the course. Water does protect some driving windows or whatnot, but fairly forgiving, or fairly average at the very least. 6 holes with water in play at TBC Scottsdale. Hey, Bobby, thanks for jumping in chat. It's good to see you this evening. Hopefully you've had a good start to your year. It's been a while since I've seen you. I know baseball will be starting up here soon. We'll get into some of that as well, but I really appreciate you jumping into the stream, into the show this evening. We're coming off a really, really bad week at Pebble, so we're going to try and turn it around for TBC Scottsdale this week. It's good to see you this evening. So with that, we'll move to Fantasy National, and as I was mentioning in the intro, we've got a pretty good field this week. There has been one field change. I have not marked him yet, so Victor Hovland has decided this time. So, as I mentioned in the intro, I've followed a pretty distinct pattern. The first week was pretty bad. Second week was good. Third week was an utter disaster. Fourth week, 2 weeks ago was really, really good. And then this past week was pretty bad. So following that pattern should be okay, but wild things happen. It is golf. But yeah, you are right. We're going to try and make this week the week. Still looking for my first win in 2025. I've had 2 runner-ups, which have pissed me off. All you can do is as the Sixers say, trust the process. So Victor Hovland has withdrawn. He has been replaced in the field by first alternate Tim Whiting. So make sure you make a note of that. That is the only field change I have seen so far. On the right track, we're trying. Last week was a setback, but Pebble's tricky. So otherwise, players in the field this week, we've got a pretty good loaded field. Hideki, Sepp Straka, who's had a fantastic start to 2025. Sung Jae, Justin Thomas, Scotty Scheffler is here. In fact, if I include 2024, Scheffler, Hideki, Matt McNeely, Sam Burns, Corey Connors, Billy Horschel, who had a fantastic Pebble Beach, and I was nowhere near. Harry Hall, who's been really hot the past 6 months or so. Sahith Theegala, Siwoo Kim, Patia, just Wyndham Clark, big names. This is a big tournament. Even if it doesn't have the signature event status, a lot of players like coming to Phoenix to play. So in the very, very early portions of 2025, your top performers just in general, because we don't have the course filter, I'm not going to use this 72 to 7400 course filter. It's just not my cup of tea, if you will. So just in general, and remember the Pebble Beach is not in here yet with that tournament finishing, just earlier today. It'll be in here tomorrow. Your top performers in the field this week at TPC Scottsdale: Hideki, Sung Jae, Sepp Straka, JJ Spawn, Lee Hodges, Justin Thomas, Harry Hall, Bo Hostler, Sam Stevens, and Thomas Dietrich. Those are your top 10 in terms of performance very early in 2025. So before we go any further, we took a look at a few of those historic conditions, particularly how I was mentioning that the rough is kept pretty short. Sometimes it's measured to average, but it's definitely not long. Green speeds, fast to average, generally pretty fast though. Again, these are generally perfect conditions. You'll hear throughout this week that the weather is dome-like. It's just perfect. 70s, very little wind, just perfect settings really for golf. And you'll notice last year at least we had a couple of rounds of easy, but mostly we get average. 2021 was really easy, but really you got mostly average style difficulty. Now the scoring record was set last year at 21 under by Nick Taylor, who's our defending champion who won in a playoff over Charlie Hoffman. But 21 is the record, at least since the renovation in 2014. Scotty has won here twice, 19 under, I believe 16 under in a playoff with Cantlay. So there are good scores to be had. 19 from Brooks in 2021. There are good scores to be had, but this is not a birdie fest. Players aren't going to go extremely low like Kapalua, like the American Express. So I'm not terribly confident in using the easy relative to par filter either. And speaking of that, let's go ahead and go to the course breakdown in Fantasy National. Take a look at TPC Scottsdale in terms of a scorecard, some graphical data. Scottsdale has a couple of challenging holes. Definitely the par 4 10th, the par 4 11th. So for any players starting their round on the back nine, they kind of ease into their round with a fairly short par 4 10th, but water does come into play on that hole, so they do have to be fairly solid off the tee from the get-go. And then the 11th, the most difficult hole, plays to close to 2/10 of a shot over par. Then a fairly long par 3 plays to a 10th of a shot. Par 4 14th, a very long par 4, plays to a 10th of a shot over par. So if players are starting on the back nine, they are greeted pretty rudely to their round. However, some of the best scoring opportunities come at the end of the back nine, with the exception of this, shortish par 5, plays to about a third of a shot under par on the front. A lot of the scoring opportunities are at the end of the back nine. The par 5, another shortish par 5, 13th. Plays to close to a half a shot under par, 3% eagle rate. Even the Island Green par 5 plays to a quarter of a shot under par. You see the drivable par 4 plays to a quarter of a shot under par. So lots of good scoring opportunities at the end of the back nine. It sets up in a very, very exciting finish for viewers and for players alike. The length of the course really is in a couple of these par 4s, because these par 5s are fairly short, 553, 558, 558, so not overly long by any stretch. The par 3s, there's a couple of fairly long ones. You've got 183 mid-length, 215 is long, ain't difficult. You got 192, but 163, of course, being the stadium hole, and they can really shorten that if they want to. So whatever length in the course there is in a couple of these pretty long brutish par 4s. Par 4 5th, 470, 475, 472, 490. That's where a little bit of this length comes into play. Like I mentioned, decent scoring opportunities on the back. Some eagles for sure. 2.5, 3, 2.5. Even the drivable par 4 yields an eagle over 1% of the time. But there are bogeys to be had throughout TPC Scottsdale as well. Moving to strokes gained by shot type, our top 10s. Ball striking course is what I think of TPC Scottsdale, and you probably should too. Approach and putting, basically even, putting slightly higher, but the off the tee is quite a bit higher than the around the green. These greens are large. It's fairly easy to hit. So with that, players aren't relying around the green all that much. They're really taking advantage off the tee. Move to top fives. That discrepancy just gets larger between off the tee and around the green. For your winners, you would expect them to be making putts, but look at the just sheer distance, I guess, significance that off the tee holds for your winners. So we're looking at a ball striking course, or at least that's the angle I'm approaching to start this week. Looking at quite a bit off the tee, some approach. Of course, we'll look at some putting, and around the green's not holding all that much. We look at strokes gained by hole by par, as you would expect for professionals. They're really taking advantage of the par fives, but I'm a little surprised that these par threes are lackluster, considering there isn't the full allotment of par fives here at TVC Scottsdale. There's only 3 par fives. Move to the top fives. Again, par fives really being taken advantage of, and for our winners, the par fours rise quite a bit for our winners, but par threes don't add a whole lot. Just don't. 200ths under, 900ths over, a 10th over, 200ths under. They're playing slightly over par when you combine the 4, but 2 under, 2 over par. Not a whole lot here in these par threes. So it'll be interesting when we go to the data dive tomorrow, see really what's happening there with the 3s, 4s, and particularly the 5s. We move to hole composition. Again, the par 3 is pretty evenly split. We've got a pretty short par 3, the stadium hole, 2 mid-length and 1 long. We do have that drivable par 4, 332, I believe it's on the scorecard. But that can play as little as 290 something if they move the tee up and put a front pin. So a very short par 4, drivable par 4 for 80 to 90% of the field. No 350 to 4 par 4s. The rest of the par 4s, the rest 10 of the 11 measure 400, 500. Nothing over 500, the closest being that 490 on the back, the pretty long, difficult par 4 14th. But 5 par 4s, 400, 450, 5, 450 to 5. And then all 3 par 5s, say they measure 550 to 600. I'm going to tell you, there's some that will come under 550 throughout the week. 558, 558, and 553. So they will fall under 550 periodically. Approach shot distribution. The last week we saw that Pebble Beach, basically 100 to 125 was double in terms of there versus the average tour event. The biggest discrepancy here is 150 to 175. About a quarter of the approach shots, a little less than that, but 24 and some change come from 150 to 175 versus 20% at the average tour event. Few 200 pluses just because these par 5s do get attacked in 2 mostly. The exception being if players are more prudent on the island green par 5. So again, be interesting to see what the data tells us in terms of approach shot, proximities, and importance, success of top 30 players in those ranges and whatnot. Cut line, for the past few years, it's hovered right around even. It's been as low as -3 way back in 2013, but that was the year before the renovation. Since the renovation, -2 in 2021 was the easiest it was. And if you'll recall, that was when we had the 3 rounds of average. Hey, good evening, Phil. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. I hope you had a good Pebble Beach, unlike me, and that you are ready for Scottsdale, the greenest show on grass. Thanks for jumping in chat this evening. So really, the cut line is kind of hovered right around even. You see 4 straight years of even, did have the very easy -2, got up to +1 one year. What I would imagine the winds might have picked up a little bit. But we're looking at right around even, which is average. It'll be average. It's actually slightly on the more difficult side of average, but average nonetheless. I don't think this is going to be extremely difficult per se, like Torrey, like a major or anything, but not a birdie fest. We're not dealing with a birdie fest around Scottsdale. Scoring distribution, we do have 20% birdies. There are good opportunities around TPC Scottsdale. Again, a lot of the back nine, the last half of the back nine was is good scoring opportunities. Your Lucas Glover outright. I'm hoping that was a good placement, like a top 5 or a top 10, because if so, that's a really, really nice hit. I was nowhere near Lucas Glover. I hope you played quite a bit of him in DFS. That was a very solid play there. I had literal 0 of Rory. I had no Russell Henley. I don't think I had any Lowry, so it was just I had him to win. Ooh. I understand the frustrations. I've had 2 of those early in 2025 that were very, very close to crossing the finish line. But I got to give Rory credit. He looked really, really good this week, and of course I didn't have him. So that tells you everything you need to know about how my week went. It just wasn't a good week. But Scottsdale, good scoring opportunities, but there are some bigger numbers that can come into play just with the water on the course. So 20% birdies, few eagles, 14% bogeys, and 1.5% doubles. I'm a little surprised that the cut line is at even. I would think this kind of distribution with so many more birdies than bogeys would be more in the -1 or -2 range, but it is what it is. Driving accuracy, a little bit misleading. I don't think players are all that concerned with being in the rough, considering it is not penal. The only time that they are conscious is if water is guarding, say the par 4 10th, the par 4 11th. So the players really aren't worried about the accuracy too much. You see that's a little bit less than tour average. Distance is quite a bit higher. Scottsdale, I believe, is a little bit above sea level, so players are going to naturally get a little bit more distance due to that. But this is a place where players can pretty free wheel driver pretty handily around Scottsdale. Green regulation percentage. These greens are large, so easier to hit greens here than the average tour event. And when you do miss the green, you're actually scrambling. Scrambling is not too difficult here. A little bit more successful than the average tour event. 3 putts about the same as the average tour event, and just due to these greens being large, proximity is a little bit further away than the average tour event. So there's a look at Scottsdale in terms of a scorecard and graphical view. So when we move back to the players in the field this week, let's go ahead and look at off the tee. I was debating whether we wanted to look at 2024 and 2025. We'll go with 2025. Just understand, like players like Scotty, Rasmus Højgaard, Minwoo Lee, Spieth. These guys don't have any data yet because Pebble Beach isn't loaded into Fantasy National. It'll be in tomorrow. So your top off-the-tee players early on in 2025, those players are Kevin Yu, Sung Jae, Charlie Hoffman, Gary Woodland, Thomas Dietrich, Keith Mitchell, K.H. Lee, Ben On, Sam Burns, and Kurt Kitayama. Your top approach players, Hideki, Chan Kim, J.J. Spawn, Sam Stevens, Mac Meisner, Tom Hoagie, Tom Kim, Sepp Straka, Nick Taylor, Andrew Putnam. Now, putting, as I discussed, this is going to be a little difficult or a little different in the sense that I might have been mistaken these years when I've grouped TPC Scottsdale in the Poa Trivialis or Base Bermuda Poa Trivialis overseed category, much like Sawgrass and San Antonio. But as we have seen in the GCSA tournament fact sheet, it is Poa Trivialis with Ryegrass overseed is what is listed. And the only other course with that, or that has that setup, specific setup, is La Quinta. La Quinta we don't get any shot link data for, since it is an alternate course to the American Express. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back all the way to 2020, I guess. And we're just going to look at TPC Scottsdale. So any player who has not played Scottsdale is clearly not going to have any data in here. But until I talk with Gabe and figure out what he thinks is the best approach, reconcile it with kind of what I have and what I'm thinking, we're going to go with putting just at TPC Scottsdale in the past 5 years, so all the way back to 2020. So you can see, let's see, players who have not played Scottsdale like Jacob Bridgman and Rafael Campos, at least in this time period. Frankie Sapan, Luke Clanton, all of them. You see how many players just have 0 rounds. It's not perfect. It's what we're going to have to settle for tonight until I figure out how I'm going to approach this moving forward. Your top putters at TPC Scottsdale in the past 5 years. Brendan Todd are in the field this week. Brendan Todd, Sahith Tagala, Billy Horschel, Sam Burns, Scotty, Daniel Berger, Kirk Kitayama, Harry Higgs, Ryan Fox, Davis Riley, and Charlie Hoffman. Good evening, Derek. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. I hope you had a better week than I did. I had a terrible week. I was hoping you would have a better week than I did. So it sounds like both of us are licking our wounds a little bit. Had Rory on 50% of my lineups and still lost. Don't know how it happens, but it did. In a no-cut event, it's easily possible. If you have players like, I'm just going to use examples here, like Christian Bezuidenhout, who T40'd. Players like Justin Thomas, who started off really well, and even into the middle of the round on Saturday, before the winds got there, he was looking fairly solid, and then just really fell off. Players like that, it is possible. Now, if this was a full field event with a cut, and you had Rory in 50% of your lineups, and then had the week you did, then I might tell you you're talented. But in a no cut event, I've seen that more often than not. Grazerman withdrawal. I was fortunate I didn't have any Grazerman. I also only had very little Obear. I was not on Hubbard, so I was able to avoid those plays. But like the players that I was very advocating for everyone to be pivots, like Bezuidenhout. I believe on Saturday he had moved up into the top 10 and then bogeyed 16, 17, and 18. I think he might have actually had a double bogey in there and just killed all of his momentum. So he T40s. Sam Stevens played well, which he finished inside the top 20. Not upset with that recommendation. But Morikawa certainly didn't pan out. I did not have Lucas Glover. Phil had Lucas Glover on an outright, so he was very close to having a big hit. My outrights, I had my closest I think was Jason Day, which wasn't exciting. It was just not a great tournament for me, and I followed that pattern. I've mentioned it a couple times now, but since you just jumped into chat, the Century was bad, the Sony was good, the American Express was a disaster, the Farmers was fantastic, and then Pebble was very bad. So by pattern, maybe I'm onto something this week. We'll see. there anything you learned from this week that we can apply to this week? I don't know. I think Pebble presents a very, very unique challenge in the sense that, one, the Pro-Am is a very significant portion of it, and some guys just don't like Pro-Ams. And two, it's a no-cut event. And no-cut events are different beasts to try to tackle. How much can we learn going into this week other than, trying to dive into the data when it gets into Fantasy National tomorrow? I'm not going to take a whole lot into it. Now, maybe some do, maybe some don't. I'm just going to take it, at face value for how a player played at Pebble. We can't take anything putting wise because Pebble had pure Poa Annua. These are Poa Trivialis and Rye Overseed. This course is longer. It has water danger, which is, I guess, fairly similar to Pebble. But Scottsdale generally plays quite a bit different than Pebble. Like, off the tee is such a big deal here. That's why we've been looking at ball striking. I know that it doesn't seem like that much for the top tens, but look at our winners. Our winners have really excelled off the tee here, and around the green is not. So, yeah, I'm just going to take it at face value, not try to extrapolate anything. Just a new week. Far fives are great. Eagle chances, yes they are. And don't feel bad about any questions you have. If I don't get to them all, I apologize, but ask any questions, and people in chat will probably be more than willing to chime in as well. But you are right. Wrong tab. You are right. Par fives are great scoring opportunities here. So even the Island Green par 5, the 15th, solid scoring opportunity. So there's a look at the putting. Your top putters at TBC Scottsdale the past, all the way back to 2020. I'll have to get with Gabe, see how he's approaching it exactly this week. And then I guess the last thing we'll look at, let's do par 5 scoring, just because par 5s are so important here. So your top par 5 performers, and again, we're mainly looking at these two. We're mostly looking at 550 to 600 because all three par 5s do fall into this range. But they are so close to that boundary, 553, 558, 558, that they will play under 550 some throughout the week. So we're mainly looking at these two ranges here, 500 to 600, mostly in this. So your top par 5 performers in the field this week since the beginning of last year, just to get enough data to make it significant. Scotty, Hayden Springer, Billy Horschel, Davis Thompson, Max Grazerman, Minwoo Lee, Justin Thomas, Bo Hostler, Mark Hubbard, and Siwoo. Are we going Scotty? I mean, like I said last week, I was off of Scotty just because I took the wait and see approach. And he ended up being 38% owned in the biggest contest, or at least, the biggest contest that I look at, that the pitch and putt on DraftKings. The $25 entry, $20 entry, whatever one it is. He was 38% owned, so not a lot of people decided to take that wait and see approach. So Fantasy National was quite off on that, on his projected ownership from last Wednesday night. It makes a whole lot of sense. So it's a good segue, Phil. It's a good segue to go to the tournament history, or strokes gained total page view. The players in the field this week and how they've played around TBC Scottsdale. The strokes gained total leader is Scotty. He did miss the cut in 2020. He has 2 wins, a 3rd, and a 7th. So, I mean, he plays Scottsdale extremely well. as I said last week, I was going to wait to see the ownerships. For me, it does depend on the ownerships, but I can't fathom him being less than 40% owned. That's really, really hard to win if you aren't unique enough off of Scotty. You can. You're setting yourself up for a 5v5 essentially right off the bat. Again, it's only Sunday night. We have three days to look at it, see if we can't find some unique options to pair with Scotty or players that we like instead of Scotty at the top of the board. We've got time. I'm not too terribly worried about trying to make lineups this early in the week. More so just trying to get a feel for the style of player that generally performs well at the tournament. Is bold, I feel like. It feels like people who faded Rory today in Showdown because he chokes and then he goes crazy. Yeah, I can't say anything because Rory was a complete full fade last week. So I can't say anything on that front. It would be bold, but then again, how bold is it if you're fading a guy that's 40-50% owned? I don't know. But over the past 5 years, Scotty's your strokes gained total leader. Like I mentioned, 2 wins, 2 other top 10s. Justin Thomas has played very well here. A couple of top 5s, a top 10 and 2 top 15s. He's played well. Hideki has been pretty good here. He's been a little less stellar past couple of years, but makes a lot of sense with all the ball striking that TPC Scottsdale promotes. Hideki is a very world-class ball striker. See, Tagala's been very good here. Do I trust Hideki this week? We'll go to XL here momentarily and see how he's putt here. That will be a pretty good indicator on at least early on how I feel. Because anytime Hideki is close to field average in putting, you gotta think about it. That's why I always like him at Riviera. It's a shame he's not going to be able to play Riviera this year. That's another reason why I like him at Sony, because he's generally okay on those greens. Hideki, I hate to boil it down to one thing, but it really is about the putter for Hideki. Nick Taylor is our defending champion, defeating Charlie Hoffman in a playoff last year. But you see, Nick Taylor's had a lot of success. He did miss the cut twice, so he's quite boom or bust. Sam Burns, boom or bust. Jordan Spieth has been excellent the past 3 or 4 years. T4, T6, T6, and then a clunker of a made cut. Horschel also been pretty good. Matt Fitzpatrick. Let's see some others here. Sungjae, 4 for 4. Not the greatest last year, but still made the cut. Webb Simpson's a former champion here. Charlie Hoffman. Anytime you think about the waste management, Charlie Hoffman generally comes to mind. So there's some of the players who have played WMPO. If I shorten it to WMPO, Waste Management Phoenix Open, that's what that is. Players who have played very well here the past 5 years. Players who have not played well here past 5 years. CT Pan, 1 for 4. Let's see. Sepp Straka, surprisingly. He hadn't played the past couple of years, but in 2020 to 2022 was not very good. Ches Reavie, 0 for 5. Peter Malnati, 1 for 4. Now, Adam Shank's been a little bit more boom or bust. He does have a top 20, a top 25, but 3 missed cuts. Matt Wallace, 1 for 3. Villegas, 0 for 2. Gary Woodland, 2 for 5. Pretty darn poor. McCarthy, 2 for 5. Patton Gazire leaves a lot to be desired there. Streelman, 1 for 4. Griot, 2 for 5. Couple top 25s and the missed cuts. So there's players who haven't played Scottsdale particularly well the past 5 years. We're going to end the show off. I am actually going to go to the early look file. And of course, I say that and I don't even have it open because I'm fantastic like that. So let me pull that up very quickly. Early look file, we'll take a look and see how some of these players have done at the Waste Management Phoenix Open. JJ Spawn, I'm surprised. Maybe he's due for a bounce back at this tournament. He's been playing well. He has been playing well. In fact, I didn't even notice. Spawn. Yeah. 0 for 2 in his last 2. He didn't play a couple times. Interesting. So good catch. He has not played well here. A little surprising, considering he's generally a pretty good ball striker, I would say. Like the irons are red hot right now. So interesting. Like, for example, last year, last year he didn't have any form coming in. Oh gosh, I apologize. So really quickly, like his irons are red hot right now, obviously. Last year he didn't have any form coming in. Missed the cut at the Sony, missed the cut at the Farmers. Was very mediocre at Pebble, missed the cut at Waste Management. And then 2023, top 5 the Century, top 15 the Sony, but then misses the cut. So, I don't know. What's his... So he's been good ball striking here. So this is a little bit more historical, 2020, 19, and 17. A bit more historical. He does have a top 5 way back in 2017. If we look at Phoenix, he's lost strokes the past couple times. Okay. I don't know. That one's interesting. Bring it up because I'm guessing he will be in the 6,000s. Maybe a good cheap option. Yeah, I mean that's something to think about for sure. I usually don't go on that train of thought until Monday or Tuesday. But yeah, I don't know about 6,000s because you do have a lot of like PGA Tour rookies in here. But I can't fathom him being any more than low 7s. For sure. I don't know about 6s, but definitely on the cheaper end. Okay, we'll end the show off. Let's go to the early look file. This is, again, performance at TPC Scottsdale, specifically at TPC Scottsdale the past 5 years. See Scotty Scheffler, our strokes gained total leader, averaging a 16th place finish because he did miss the cut in 2020. Thomas, 5 for 5, average finish of 8th. Signature? No, it is not a signature event. Yeah, so we'll have a cut, and we'll have we'll have some open qualifiers that are definitely going to be in the low 6s. So, but I don't think Spawn will be overly expensive for sure. We look at Hideki just very, very quickly. I might have to. There he is, right there. So interesting. We might want to key in on Hideki due to the fact that he's actually putt pretty well here, averaging 1 stroke a tournament. Doesn't sound like much, but when you're averaging that, it's pretty strong. What I want to do, since this is a regular stop on the PGA Tour, let's filter out all the players who have only played it once. I just want to see the players who continuously play TPC Scottsdale, what they're doing well. Look at all this off the tee. It's just a big factor this week. So we'll be looking at off the tee. We're going to definitely be looking at some distance, maybe even some fairways gained. Just off the tee in general. Big factor here. You've got 19 players who have averaged a top 40 or better. Averaged a top 40 or better. I keep wanting to stress that. Like, top 40 doesn't sound great, but if you're averaging that, that's fairly solid. You like that course, that venue quite a bit. This is a 1.5. That's pretty darn strong. Hey, good evening, Darnell. Thanks for jumping to chat. Much appreciated. Hopefully you had a much more successful Pebble Beach than it seems like the majority of chat has had this past week. Mine was a I can't say a disaster. It was better than the American Express, but not by a whole lot. Shit week for me. So sounds like we're all licking our wounds a little bit. Jake Knapp puts well on those greens. He usually is not reliable. Knapp is somebody. Granted, he hadn't. He came onto the tour last year or maybe the year before. Knapp's somebody I'm still trying to figure out. Just full transparency. I don't know when to target Jake Knapp and when not to. Not yet early on in his career. So lots of off the tee here for the players who have played really well year over year here. Of course, a lot of ball strike or a lot of approach as well as a 1.3. So look at that. Off the tee is outweighing the approach for the players who have averaged the top 40. So keep that in mind. Off the tee is going to be 2 small errors. Fed me won't happen again. I'm locked in. Well, let's hope so. I'm curious to hear who the 2 mistakes were, because I had several. I think the best recommendation I had for you all was Sepp Straka being a pivot in the 8s, because he played extremely well. I know he didn't finish in the top 5 today. He kind of stalled out a little bit, but for being so low owned in the 8s, he was a fantastic play. That's about the best that I can say I did for Pebble, and I didn't use him nearly enough in my lineups. Around the green, just doesn't matter. You don't see a whole lot of big numbers in here. Putting, fairly solid, 1.6. Obear was my biggest. I mean, I had him a couple of times, but I generally stayed away from Obear just because I didn't know how he felt off of the flu. I mean, the guy had the literal flu at the Farmers, so that generally takes, I don't care who you are. I mean, you can be a prime athlete. Flu generally takes a few days to get over. We'll definitely be looking at some distance. It's not mandatory. I mean, we've seen players like Nick Taylor, who's not long, defending champion, win here. But generally, it's good to have. Justin Thomas, Scotty, of course, winning here twice. I think distance is going to be a factor, not mandatory, but a factor. I just kind of want to skip through here. Look at, let's see, par 3s. They didn't matter for a whole lot now. Kitayama and Tagala have played them well, but there's just not a whole lot to be gained here. This is a 0.9. This is a 2.6. That's pretty large. This is a 1.4. Not a whole lot. So interesting. And then see if we find anything in the proximity very quickly. He worked for DraftKings. He said, "I feel great." Took the bait. Yeah, it happens. Most prevalent approach shots 150 to 175. There's some data in here. There's some high green. So interesting. Again, we'll dig into a whole lot more of this tomorrow in the data dive. But again, early on in your week of preparations and thinking about players, I can't stress it enough. We're going to be looking at a whole lot of off the tee, ball striking in general, but a whole lot of off the tee. And I need to check with Gabe, see how he's approaching putting, considering I think I might have it wrong in the surface type that's here at Scottsdale. But that's going to do it for the show this evening. Let me bring back everybody in the field, even those who have only played once. I want to thank Bobby and Phil and Derek for jumping to chat. Very much appreciated. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting and subscribing. Always appreciate it. Love what I do. Taking a very in-depth look at sports statistics, golf statistics mainly, but sports statistics. Trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Some weeks much better than others. Like last week. Last week was really, really bad. Doesn't sound like a lot of members in the community had a lot of success. So we're going to try and step our game up and continue the pattern from bad to good, bad last week. Hopefully good this week for the waste management. Keith Mitchell, someone I can't figure out. It's Mitchell's all about the putter a lot of times. Keith Mitchell's a lot about the putter. And I generally like Keith Mitchell when it's difficult because of his excellent ball striking. But yeah, Mitchell's somebody that can frustrate you. Team no putt for sure. So again, thanks to you three for jumping in the chat. Thanks to everyone else out there. I really do appreciate all the support. I love what I do. Wouldn't be able to do it without you all. So thanks again for all the wagers you made this past week for Pebble Beach, for all of the DFS contests you played this past week for Pebble Beach. Until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.